You're listening to In Coaching, your backstage pass into the world of coaching. I'm your host, Ioana Jongsma, a Gestalt and neuromindfulness coach with a love for stories. I'm delighted to run this first season of the In Coaching podcast in partnership with the Gestalt Institute of Cleveland, where I graduated from my GPCC in May 2024. If you're considering becoming a coach, or you are a coach already and you're looking to upgrade your skills, the folks at the Gestalt Institute of Cleveland would be happy to chat with you. You can explore what the Gestalt methodologies offer coaches, how they relate to the ICF requirements and certifications, and what would be expected of you throughout the Gestalt Coach Certification Program. My guest today is Gail Froelicher, founder and CEO of professional coaching company Kinetic Insights. Gail is an executive coach herself, an ICF PCC with over 4,000 coaching hours on her log. Gail also has 20 years of experience as an operations executive in the fast-paced tech sector, both stateside and internationally. Gail is not new to leadership. She held her first management position at 25 years old as Director of Southwest Region and went on to become European Division President at 35. She is also a Gestalt Professional Certified Coach since 2014, and I have had the privilege of having Gail as the director of my program at the Gestalt Institute of Cleveland Coaching Certification. Talk about standing on the shoulders of giants. Welcome, Gail.
Thank you, Ioana.
It's good to be here with you today.
Yes, let's have a little fun today.
Yeah, so I thought we'd start with a little exploration of your world first. So you're an executive coach. What is that like?
Yes, it's fun. It's a blast. It really is. I've really enjoyed working with executives. I get to use my entire background. I get to use, my executive experience, the tech sector, world experience, my certification as a coach to help leaders explore their own leadership. And just, it's so fun to do that. And then to watch them have small or large ahas kind of makes me a little giddy inside. So plus there's an added benefit in the fact that I learn so much about other industries. I learn about leadership. You can always learn more, right? People in general. So it's been a fun career to have.
Fantastic. So I love what you're saying about small and big ahas and how they make an impact on you as well. And I'm curious, what do they all share, your clients?
They all share a title. That's about it. Honestly, they're all very different. Even if somebody came in and said, I want to talk about competing priorities, it is a different priorities, right? Some of them do onboarding so they're going to have a fast start. Some are the competing priorities like managing and propagating a vision while they're getting quarterly results. Some of them it's confidence. Some of it's just, looking at new skills. I had one gentleman that wanted to work on networking because he'd only networked internally. And he was a president. So it's all of them are interesting, but they're all just so different. And so not a lot alike other than the title.
Right. So in this diversity, do you differentiate how you coach them?
I don't know if I differentiate how I coach them, but I pay attention to things that are a little bit different. So, for example, a top executive, they come in, they want to be challenged by somebody who's had similar experience. They want to know that you understand where they are, right? I have had very few of them say, just give me the answer. So my questions are probably stepped up a bit as far as a challenge, and I'm more open to doing brainstorming with them. which is not typically a coaching skill. And it isn't something that is true, vanilla coaching, but it's what's needed. And they aren't going to take anybody else's ideas and run with it as their own. They're going to really understand what they want to do. Right. So that's a top tier. The mid tier, they're looking to make a bigger impression or to meet something that will get them to their goals faster. So they are looking for completely different challenges in a completely different way. It's not challenging the norm so much, it's challenging how they're showing up as a leader. And then the lower level managers, it's a thirst for knowledge. When they get a coach, I'll hear often, just tell me the answer, because they're collecting data, they're collecting knowledge to try to get to that next level of getting to their goal. And next level, when I say that, doesn't necessarily mean promotion. It could mean acquiring knowledge, being an expert, but they need to know how to get there. And so it's really sometimes you even have to help them find their own resources. So, point them in the right direction, ask enough questions around what they're going to go do next. It's different. I don't know, my approach is different. It's just what I will and won't do in the session, and what they expect of me is probably different.
So learning mode, fine-tuning mode, and exploration mode. If we were to
I like that.
Go up on a scale, that's kind of how I would synthesize that. Yeah.
That fits.
If we were to expand the field a little bit, I'm being Gestalty here. What changes have you noticed over the years in your clients' discourse? Could be needs, challenges, how they look at the world, whatever you might have seen.
Probably the biggest one I'll talk about first here is that I often was approached with clients, whether it be the company hiring or the client saying that, they wanted approaching me for an engagement, that it was much more fix it. This is a fix this employee. And it was interesting because when you have a fix it employee, you really have to broaden your look, because it's oftentimes something maybe that is external to the employee that isn't known, or it might be something going on with the boss and or the boss isn't maybe managing them in a way that is productive, or it could just be they're just not a good fit in this position. And so that was very common. And so it was more difficult, because it's I don't even take those engagements anymore. Because typically it's not the employee, it is one of those other things. So I can change the employee, but it won't matter, right?
Mm-hmm. So the question is, where's the gap?
I can't change the employee. The employee can change themselves. So.
I said the question is, where's the gap? Where's the mismatch between the person and the organization, or another person? Or
Yes. Other things that have changed, the larger organizations and now mid-sized organizations are looking at who they hire as a coach. They typically were hiring external coaches 20 years ago for any time they brought, somebody in from the outside. Now it's a mix. They have external coaches for their top executives, and then the low mid-level and then newer managers, they'll have an internal, typically going through certification, an internal almost certified coach to work with them. So that's another one that is a difference. The environment always makes a difference as well. COVID was a big change, and leaders were looking at very different things that they hadn't worked on before. So they really, again, wanted to brainstorm or figure out new skills. All of those were prevalent. And then you have your typical change in the environment where it's a very high producing, very successful company. You're going in and they're flush with cash. They tend to overhire. And so leaders are saying, wow, I have a big group and I need to be productive with them and make sure I do onboarding, et cetera. When you have downturns in the economy, you're going to have the opposite. Leaders are saying, I need to do more with less, and I've not done that before, because we have cycles. So that's a big one.
From where you are standing now, how do your clients talk about the world of work? What do they see around them and how do they feel about it?
Yeah. That the world has so much going on right now with wars and skirmishes and political divisiveness and binary thinking and tribalism. There's just so much going on in the world, and that is having a huge impact inside companies as well. Um, I personally think, and I've read some things that say it's happening in schools. I don't have children, so I don't know that, but I'm hearing that, they're seeing a lot of change in the kids in school. And I'm certainly seeing more bullying, but it's been an acceptance of things that haven't been accepted before. The people that I have spoken to and my clients inside are working with very typical things, trying to rebuild trust, right? That's a big one because, if employees are not trusting each other and they're not trusting the organization as a whole, it's a disconnect. If they don't have that foundational, it's really hard to get the work done effectively and efficiently. So I think that's one. AI is a big one that everybody talks about because there's this, wow, it's really great. Oh, wow, it could reduce the amount of jobs we have, right? There's this, it's great, but there's fear. And there's both sides of that have to be managed. And I hear a lot about that in work. I'm personally seeing, and I'm seeing some of the top executives talk about, we need to pay attention and focus on creating long-term strategic critical thinking. And in employees that are coming in leaders, even in the kids coming through school. And maybe that was a function of my growing up, but I'm seeing it in the environment with 5, soon to be 6 generations in the workforce. Some of the younger generations, it isn't something coming up because it isn't something taught. It isn't. And without being able to ask those questions, what's going on now? What are all the options? How can I impact this in a positive way? What is a way forward that people can get behind? Not the way forward everybody loves, but that we can all get behind. When's that going to get done? How would we do it? What's next? I mean, that's just basic critical thinking. And I think that coaches are going to have an impact there in the future. That's definitely something I'm hearing some of the top executives talk about as well.
So I'm thinking about what you said in relation to long-term strategic thinking and critical thinking. And what I'm wondering is, how easy is it to do that in a world that's changing so much faster now with the advent of AI? But not only, I mean, we've been hearing this discourse for so long, the world is changing ever faster, and it is.
It is. It is.
And so how are people relating to that? And how are coaches relating to that in what you're seeing around you?
This is that managing competing, not just priorities, competing focus. We have all of this chaos happening and because of the changes, and we still have to look ahead, right? If you aren't looking ahead, if you don't plan, you get what you planned, right? And so it's one of those things that coaches, because we teach polarities, right? Competing priorities and competing focus. To work those in a healthy way, you have to look at it as a polarity. I'm working one side, of that polarity today for a bit, and then I'm working the other side. And when I have too much of one, I better look at the other. And so, that really thinking about how do I work that competing focus as a polarity is really important. And I think coaches learning those types of things in their coaching skills can be a way that they can help.
Where do you see coaching going? What are some of the trends that are happening in coaching itself?
2 years ago was the very first time in 20 years that I've been asked if I have certification. So to me, that's a huge trend. People are expecting coaches to have certification. If you don't, you have to, just having the experience. Well, I had an executive experience, but I went and got coach training. And I think the blend of the two allows me to have, and other coaches that have done the same thing, high value, faster, and more sustainable, right? So the certification is really critical. Number two is the ROI. It used to be people hired coaches and they're like, yeah, you're working with a coach and I'll talk to you in 6 months. And then all of a sudden it's like, now we want to be part of the process. So we want to know what the goals are, and we want it every month to know. And you can't give in every month because of the ethics of coaching, as you know. So we're now more reasonable, but they're expecting there to be a return on their investment. And that requires a coach to really be specific and the hard questions on what is it that somebody wants to accomplish and how will that benefit them and what will that look like, right? And not just benefit them, but benefit the organization. So I think that ROI is a critical piece. The other thing, though, is ICF came along and they really worked out what are the foundations of coaching. So you get your certification, you have the foundation, but you have to continue learning and growing. And I think that's going to be really critical as we take in these next decade of what is happening in the world and where it's going to go. So really having coaches work their learning edge, I think, is another trend that we're seeing it's much more prevalent than when I came in. When I came in, it's like, oh, come in and help us because you're an executive. It's like, well, but I'm also certified. What is that? So it's different. And so I think it's good. It's very good.
I love that expression, the learning edge. It made learning very physical for me because I feel like I'm literally pushing against an edge or standing on an edge. And before coming into the program, I was like, okay, I love learning. It's like, it's my happy place. It was a cozy space. And then suddenly thinking about it as my learning edge became something much less cozy, but where I learned a lot more as well. So thank you.
I kind of look at it like you're on that edge and you're building a bridge.
Yeah.
But where's the bridge going?
Mm-hmm.
I think we all know that there are places our bridge needs to go. So building the bridge while you're going across it, maybe. That sounds like where we're headed right now.
Absolutely. So I want to come back to you for a bit. And I know that why is a bit of a loaded question for us Gestaltists, but I'm going to poke at it anyways, because I want to explore the whys that someone might have for becoming a coach and a Gestalt coach. So I want to start with you, and I'd love to hear what was your driver for leaving your senior role and everything that came with that and stepping into the coaching world.
Well, as you noted in the opening, I was a leader early, but I was in the tech sector on the West Coast. So a woman was more uncommon than it is now. And so walking into that, I didn't really have mentors and advisors and, people that could really coach and help me get there. So my leadership was, what are my instincts? What does it feel right for me? And I'm a natural introvert. Nobody believes me when I say that. But if you look up the Myers-Briggs definition, I'm an introvert. And so I was a learned extrovert. So I had to figure out how not to do it a typical way, but to do it my way. And I worked really hard at that. And somehow it was successful. And so when I discovered that and I was looking for my next steps, I then had two really impactful conversations with people. One was I had someone reflect back my accomplishments to me and ask questions around, what I did to make those things happen. And it was looking at it from a different angle, right? We look at it inside out. This is somebody making me look at it outside in. And it was different and it was impactful and I saw it differently. So that was one. The second thing was I had somebody recommend that I sit down and reflect on what I loved about it and what I hated about it. And just those two little conversations, they seemed little at the time until I finished and went, oh, I'm on the wrong track, right?
Polarity, if there ever was one.
Exactly. But it's one of those things I realized I loved pulling potential out of people and I wanted to get better at it. And so I started my coaching journey. And then it was just, I had somebody from my past. I had breakfast with them one day, and literally halfway through a sentence, she says, "Time out. Do you realize you're glowing?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" She goes, "You are just coming out with the passion." And the entire time I've known you, which she knew me 10 years, that she said, "I never saw that when you were in corporate." So that passion is what I'm using for the coaching. And so that's my journey of why I ended up here. And now coaching, really helping coaches train and become good coaches, not just with the ICF competencies, but as you know, the Gestalt, which I feel like puts the ICF competencies on steroids, helping coaches go out into the world knowing what the world looks like right now it's just as much fun as working with the clients that are executives. So in case you can't tell, I'm a little passionate about it.
See some of that glow coming on.
Yeah, exactly.
What helped you make the change? Because I imagine that was not super smooth transition to make. It's a big life decision.
The transition wasn't that hard because, I'd been in a fairly high powered position, so I could afford to make the choice. And so when I did it, I went all in, right? And that's who I am anyway. If I'm going to make a decision, once I know it's the right decision, all right, move on, let's go, right? But I have to have that whole, head, heart, gut, knowing that it's going to work. Not knowing it's going to work, I have to know it needs to work, but that it's the right thing for me, right? That when I get that, I move into it. So the transitions are not that hard for me. So that's number one. But number two, my background, I started in sales. And then, of course, when you become a sales manager at 25, you start teaching people sales, right? And it was on the West Coast. And so it was one of those things I had to be good at it because otherwise I couldn't afford to live there. Couldn't afford to eat if I wasn't good at it. So, my early stage of learning how to sell my way, not tell you what I have, but figure out what you need and what I have and whether there's a good price and solution for us to work together. That helped a lot because I think there are a lot of coaches, consultants, people that think this is real glorified because they could work from home and they can, make their own hours, but they forget that they're not just doing the work. They have to bring the work in, right? And so for me, bringing the work in was a little easier because I didn't mind the networking. I knew how to talk to people and ask what they needed. And then I could put that together. And then, therefore, a lot of coaches would come to me and say, "Can I work under you?" So I created a cadre of coaches that I could then offer back to companies based on what their needs were and what the client, was looking for. I got to ask those questions and give them a solution. So over the course of time, that sales really helped a lot. So
I can definitely think back at when I started as a coach about 6 years ago and how hard it was to sell at first.
yes.
I had, I think, a couple of years when I was very, very self-conscious about posting things online. I felt so exposed and so worried about, what are people going to think when they actually start working with me? Are they going to be disappointed? So I went through all of that. But as someone who wears all the hats in my own little business unit, I'm painfully aware of how much time and work it is to do everything, bring the work in, do the admin stuff, do my own work, my own education, all the networking, all of that. So that took me back. So what about someone like me who's maybe not becoming a coach just now, but by comparison on an earlier stage in their journey? What would you tell them to look out for in the current landscape?
I'm a true believer on certification. I drop 3 months off of my engagements. I go deeper, faster. It's sustainable. Certification has so much value. You already have that now. And I think organizations, if you're working with organizations, are already asking if you have it and what do you have. And eventually we'll get so that more of individuals are asking as well. So for me, don't skip that step. I waited 10 years into coaching before I actually did it. And I wish I hadn't, right? I wish I'd done it right up front, because it is a different way of using your experience. And otherwise we're tempted to be a manager or a mentor or an advisor, and that's not coaching. So, and it doesn't stick. So, as we both know. So that's number one. The second thing is learning edge. With the environment, the way we talked about, this polarization and binary thinking and tribalism and just the divisiveness that's out there, I think coaches have to settle into who they are, and they have to be really aware of that, which I think the Gestalt program does a phenomenal job of helping our coaches settle into that and be able to hold it, even if it is so very different than where their client is, in service of the client. And if it isn't, they still can hold it, right? So, but not knowing your bias, not knowing what's over that edge as you're in your learning edge, right? Not knowing that is not in service of the client. So I think that's really critical for people to know, and continuing to learn and add skills, whether you're brand new or whether you're somebody like me, we have to keep going, because the world is changing and we've got to get really good at being that neutral ground that can challenge the leaders or the people in the world today to make a difference. And so I don't think there's anything more important than that one. So those are my two big ones.
I love the neutral ground metaphor. What about the next, say, 5 to 10 years? What advice would you give a beginner coach?
In the early stages of my coaching, everybody said, you have to have a niche, you have to have a niche. And I'm like, well, my niche is executive. So what do you do with executives? And it's like, they're all different. How do you say that? So I think that a niche is important, but I think it's more a category. There's so many more categories of coaches now than there used to be. And so knowing where you fit and getting the knowledge of that and the knowledge of coaching is critical for that matchup to really be able to make an impact. So, the big ones right now are productivity coaching, executive and leadership, entrepreneurial, financial coaching. Well, those all have things behind. Oh, health and wellness is the other one. So I think it's the second fastest growing. Those 5, if you just looked at them and said, could the coach do all of those? No. So, are you going to be able to do health and wellness and also do the executive side? Well, it depends on who's paying, but that's a really kind of different skill set. So I think understanding what turns you on as a coach and where you can get passionate of understanding the market, the trends, and then also how you can bring all of your skills and methodology to that neutral place to help somebody change and make it sustainable. I think it's critical to ask yourself those things and understand yourself well enough to be able to bring that. And also, figure out your category. So I think that's the advice I would give.
So what comes up for me as you say this is, where do I feel home?
Yes.
Or maybe where do I want to get? That would be the 2 things that I would look at based on the direction that you highlight. Sometimes you don't want to stay home. You want to go to your learning edge, maybe.
We have to look at, for example, if you're in some very unrelated industry, I hear a lot of people want to be an executive coach. And I get it. The price point, the fees that we can charge are a little higher. But then life coaching specifically, but if you look at that and say, what does an executive need and want from a coach? If you can't answer that and answer that in a way that says, and this is how I match it, probably not the right place for you. Right. And I'm sure you went through that in your coaching. Where should I go? And what am I think we had that conversation where you were in the program too.
Absolutely. And after.
Yeah. But what do those people need? And executives need somebody who can stand beside them and challenge them. Quick little story. Early on, one of the people on my cadre of coaches was a therapist, right? And she was a phenomenally talented therapist, still is, by the way. She just doesn't practice anymore. But I put her into working with a client who her boss's boss said, don't ever bring her to any of our meetings again, right? Because she was disruptive and she was abrasive. And so I put this therapist in as her coach, and it was a wonder match, right? And it was just within 3 months, they tested it and put her back in with the boss, and the boss said, what is different? Something's different here. But she had done a phenomenal job in a very short amount of time. I could have probably done it, but on the other hand, why would I if she can do it faster? And it stuck. But in the process of that engagement, the client said something about a P&L. And the therapist said, oh, what's that? Right. And it's just, and the client, the client was laughing with her boss. Her boss called and said, what have you done? Who do you have in here? Like, did it work? Let's start there. Is it working? It's working. Great. Then I made the right choice. Second of all, she's a therapist.
Okay.
I will close that gap. I will make sure she knows what a profit and loss statement is. I'll give her some basic concepts so that doesn't happen again. But it was eye-opening for me, but it was kind of like she was coaching this woman who was a middle-level manager on personal skills, but she didn't have that knowledge. So if she didn't have me behind it with the business knowledge to educate her, it wouldn't have been a place she could have succeeded really well in reputation, right?
Yeah. Well, sometimes
we laugh about it now. So.
Yeah, sometimes I think it can be quite beneficial to have somebody who is completely foreign to your world,
yes,
because it brings in such a fresh look. So if the client can appreciate that, then everybody's happy. Of course, you can also see the lack in it.
That's that matchup, matching the right coaches to the right client. I've had people come to me and they're like, heard about you from so-and-so and I'd like to hire you. It's like, okay, there's me and this other person that you'll interview. And I want you to really do a good job of interviewing and figure out who you feel like you're going to be able to accept, challenge, and help yourself evolve with best. Right. So even when they said, I want you, I would always bring in another one of the coaches and then you choose which you feel is the right one for you. One, it gives the client control in an organization that says you're going to have a coach, right? It gives them some control and some choice. And so they're more committed to the relationship, and to the work, doing the work. Yeah. But it's also, it has to be the right match.
Well, on this note, Gail, what is present for you in the here and now? How would you like to close this conversation?
We talked about the things going on in the world and talked about what's important for coaches. So maybe I'd just like to put out there, because what's really, that learning edge is so prevalent for me. And it's probably why I took on the Gestalt Coaching Certification Program chair. I want to see coaches learn, but I don't think it's ever been more important because of what is going on in the world and what is going on in organizations and how much organizations are having to structurally change for this new dynamic, whether it be AI or some of the other wonderful tech that's come out. I think we have to keep up our skills to be able to work in that environment. And so the learning edge, it feels like we talked about it a lot, that it kept coming up. So when you said what comes up for me, and it's like, I think that's just critical. So I think that's where I'll leave it.